Good afternoon, everybody. The November meeting of the Citrus County Aviation Advisory Board is hereby in session. Call to order. If I could ask you to join me, please, in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. When I was a little kid in the boys' club, we had summer camp. You know, you'd go there for the day and do crafts and things like that. And one of the things I did was one of these copper etchings of the Pledge of Allegiance. So it had a flag and the pledge underneath, and somehow I didn't quite get all the letters exactly in there. So my dad's looking at that as one nation under God, invisible. I didn't have quite the letters done. Ms. Jenkins, if you'd be so kind as to let us know who's here for the record.
Absolutely. Today in attendance we have Carl Flanagan,
Here.
George McDonald,
Here.
Keith Pullius,
Here.
Chairman Heiko Kallenbach.
Here.
Absent, I am showing Mark Klingel and Charles Carr.
And
Louise Michaels.
Louise Michaels.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you much. Has everybody had a chance to look at last month's minutes as amended by Ms. Jenkins here on the, simply to add the one update from the Board of County Commissioners that they did in fact approve the purchase of the Powerball markers for Godfrey Lane and that they have been in fact so bought? If so,
I make a motion to accept.
thank you, sir. Second by George. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Last month's minutes are approved. Throw the meeting open to the public. Anybody have anything that they'd like to bring before the board?
Hello, everyone. Andy Chan, Right Rudder Aviation. Just give you guys an update on a couple things. First off, we did have the Citrus County Blessings Ball at our facility last month. That was a good success, and they actually achieved their fundraising goals of the evening, we're proud to say. Unfortunately, there was an incident that resulted from that where someone drove into the fence at the airport. Todd took excellent action and got the fence repaired very swiftly. So that was great, but unfortunate event that occurred there. Mesa Airlines program has been running well and smoothly. Still have around 50 cadets. We're supposed to get one more aircraft over the next couple of weeks. So that program is running smoothly and the cadets are graduating. The airline industry is still a volatile industry, but Mesa is still hiring, even though others like Spirit are put a freeze on hiring temporarily. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops over time. One of our tenants that we attracted, AirLife, has been a great tenant, has paid their bills on time, but unfortunately they just declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So they are restructuring. We've been in communication with them. They have said that there should be no impacts to payments to Right Rudder. They don't intend to close their base or anything like that. They are looking to restructure some debt. So if you see that in the news, be aware that we are in communication with them with respect to that. We are hiring mechanics and instructors. If anyone knows any instructors or mechanics looking for positions, we are still actively hiring for those positions. Recently, I personally joined the FAA General Aviation Joint Steering Committee Safety Analysis Team, or GAJSC SAT, as they like to say.
Okay. Couldn't have shortened that one, could they?
Very, very boring committee, I must say, but interesting to be a part of FAA safety and see how that goes forward. There's several meetings a year on an annual basis that take place there. This past meeting was actually focused on data collection. If some of you may have received in the mail a little flyer that they send out to aircraft owners asking how many hours you flew and things of that nature. A lot of people throw those away, but actually the response to that form is very, very important. So if you get one in the future, please respond to it, just saying how many hours you've flown, et cetera, and that kind of provides the baseline for the statistical analysis to determine if general aviation is getting safer or less safe in general. The good news is that obviously now there's ADS-B data, so they're supplementing the voluntary responses with that data, but there's pitfalls to data collection in either way. So I'll be reporting, in general, back just to the board here so that you guys are aware that the steps the FAA is taking on general aviation safety to enhance that. It's pretty much all we have. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any comments from the board? Okay, new business.
Alrighty, go right ahead. No, a new business is announced expiration of terms.
which would be me. We have 4 terms expiring January, and that would be Carl Flanagan for District 1, George McDonald for District 4, Keith Polius for District 5, and Charles Carr, member at large. You can go to the website and find the application if you're interested in applying to be reappointed. I will just note that make sure you provide your background information as well as the board mentioned with the previous expiring terms.
Do you need an update of the expiring term member, whatever? You need your updated resumes? Or will the
Yeah.
resumes from 2 years ago do?
I would give updated based on how the previous applications went, just to make sure that everything goes smoothly and the board has all the information they would want.
Okay. On a personal note, obviously, it's up to the Board of County Commissioners. We serve at the pleasure of, but I think the 7 of us have worked well together, so I'd welcome the 4 of you reapplying and staying on board.
Yeah, as long as you keep bringing coffee and donuts, you're fine with me.
Well, I have to be careful not to try to buy votes or influence people with that. But as long as that's clear, that's the plan.
Sounds good.
Okay, that's it for old business, new business, old business.
Old business, financial analysis and business planning study. Still collecting data, sending things off to Dr. Byers, which we'll be having a presentation later on in this meeting. Next is FAA training. I'm still trying to get in touch with the special agent I've been talking with. He's been tough to nail down. So I was able to talk with another member and, let me back up. So for this training, for right now, kind of rescheduled. When I get a better date on when someone can come out here and provide this, that'd be great. More to follow with that. So moving on, I did talk with another FAA member, and this person suggested that I submit a formal FAA complaint. I think they call it a hot ticket. And I just did a data dump. And then here you go, here's all the information on this person. And what that is going to do is that it forces them to actually enact on this. Not saying that they weren't going to anyway. There seems to be enough data where they were moving forward, but this gets more supervisors involved. Like, hey, what's going on? Let's track this down. Let's figure it out. What that should do is get somebody in the area and start to investigate.
At the speed of the FAA.
You said that. So, again, more to follow.
Okay, so so they made this suggestion to file this formal complaint.
Yes, and I can already tell you that the FAA is very short-staffed.
Sure, I understand. So are we filing this complaint then?
I already did.
You already did. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, filed it.
Good.
All right. We will get some action on that. Hangars?
Hangars. As you can see, INF has, I got an update here. There's 21 T hangars available at Crystal River. And, oh, I'm sorry, that's the waiting list. That's 16 T hangars 0 vacancy. There's 21 on the waiting list. And for CGC, it's 20 T hangars, 1 vacancy. Next month is gonna be 2. And there's 20 on the waiting list. And then, of course, box hangars, 0 vacancies, and there's 6 on the waiting list.
Thank you very much.
Board of County Commissioner updates. I can read the list here. It's Crystal Rivers FBO lease agreement, amendment number 1 for INF Business Park. FDOT grant agreement, that's INF corporate hangar. Crystal Rivers runway extension, and INF Business Park workshop. That will be the 28th of November at 10 a.m.
And this is a workshop to discuss both the runway extension and the business park?
Both projects, and then also the financial study as well. Should be a brief update on what's going on with those. That's it.
Okay.
Crystal Rivers fuel tank replacement grant amendment. Inverness's runway taxiway maintenance and remarking of payment. That is a grant. And then the last but not least, announce expiring terms and accepting applications will be going to the board this month.
Great. Thank you very much.
Alrighty, moving on to major projects. So what I decided to do was to break this up into major and minor, kind of give you guys a little bit of inside football of some of the smaller projects that are going on. There's not too much to report on those, but I'll get to it in just a minute. Major projects, Crystal River runway extension. Right now, we're still in the pre-EA phase. Still collecting data, and we're also discussing alternative roadways. Since we're going to be extending that, it's going to be going through the road and into bushes and trees, all that. That road is no longer going to be accessible. So finding the best path to make sure traffic flows smoothly. We have a few options to choose from, and when that starts to get more finalized, then of course I'll share that. But pardon me. What else? FAA reviewing the bill grant for Aegis survey. Hopefully you should hear something February of next year. And that's really about it for right now for the runway extension.
Okay.
Crystal Rivers fuel tank replacement. Like I said, the grants to BOCC, we do have 100% plans, and that is moving on schedule. Crystal Rivers wetland removal wildlife study, ongoing, still on schedule to be complete by January of next year. Inverness's airspace study obstruction removal. Working on a new scope of work and also to complete public outreach. We've had some extensive conversations with my consultant who is here, Daniel, with ICE, and then also with FAA, trying to get an understanding of this complicated process, at least for me, and trying to find a path forward, because there is obstructions on airport and there's obstructions off of airport, and this is a slow process, if you can imagine. So just trying to navigate that correctly. That's moving forward.
Great.
Inverness's Business Park, phase 1 is on schedule. Should still be complete by 12/24. Phase 2, still talking with Florida Commerce about the grant and some items, grant language in particular, to make sure that, let me back up, and also phase 2 design, looking at this closely again and each item that's going to be included with phase 2. Really just making sure all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. There's been a few specificities on some of the grant language, and the last thing we'd want to do is, if it's calls for a 3,200 foot taxiway extension and it's 3201, that's an amendment. So little things like that, and we're trying to clear up and make sure that we're a lot more accurate. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Inverness's corporate hangar, again, grant submitted to BOCC, and the same with pavement and remarking. Airport signage and landscaping, discussing scope of work with ICE, our consultant. I think that's it for major. Any questions?
No, sir. Thank you.
All right, minor projects. That's basically going to be the same answer, which is I'm just in the process of asking for quotes. A lot of it's painting. And there's also a deck and ramp on the old FBO that, instead of me going through each one, you can kind of read that there's like 3 projects that require paint, cleaning and painting. I'm just going to be going out for quotes, seeing what I can get to get the job done. AWAS replacement, I am been talking with the FAA and making sure that our bill grant entitlements and a quote, 3 quotes from companies to perform this work. And so far, everything's under budget. Because FAA was expecting this to be about $250,000. And I think someone on the board said they've even heard it at $300,000. And ours is a lot cheaper than that.
What kind of
So-
numbers are you seeing?
108, 112, 120, 130.
Cool.
Yep. So I'm looking forward to that.
The
And that-
AWAS is currently functioning, is that right?
It is functioning, but it is 15 years old, and we've had some issues with for some reason, wasps like to build a nest on this equipment. Every time I go out there, there's a nest, and you can shoo them away, and then next day they're already starting to build again. I don't know what it is. They don't do that at Crystal River. I have no idea. But
Quit putting honey on the
someone,
AWAS
yeah,
receptors.
it was a little sticky around there.
Right?
And then last, I'm looking at Crystal River's awning around the FBO, and then some. Trying to get, I got a few people out there. James Chen as well has gotten a quote to try to replace the awning, because right now it's like a canvas material, and getting something that's more like a painted aluminum, something better than what's out there. So, and that is it.
Okay, short and sweet. Any questions, comments, snide remarks?
I have one question, and it's kind of a dated one. Quincy had brought to our attention that the National Guard was going to be expanding their footprint over there. Has there been any further discussion or conversation that you're aware of?
It's a good question. I haven't thought about that or heard anything in a while. I know that they have a silt fence around. I'd have to find out if, I think that might be theirs, because it is going around their property.
Right.
But I haven't talked with anyone about this. But I'll follow up for sure.
Okay, because I saw them remove it. I saw them removing some pads, concrete pads out there yesterday and today.
Okay.
We actually ended up driving by there today. I was
Oh.
with Quincy, and he mentioned that that is supposed to expand their parking or vehicle capacity in that fenced
yeah,
off area. He said that they actually leased a lot more land, but a lot of it's wetlands, so they wouldn't actually able
Yeah.
to put anything as far as this extended down. But that fenced area is supposed to be additional parking.
Okay, I just wanted to ensure that that wasn't going to be in conflict with the study that's being conducted.
No.
Would you know by any chance, does the National Guard have to come to the county for building permits to do stuff like that? Or are they exempt?
That's a good question. Them being military.
What I was thinking was, and I'm not worried about parking lots, but I was thinking about one year if they decide they want to put up a building or something and how that might affect things.
I don't know the answer on that, but can find out though.
Okay.
Just taking notes.
Mr. Byers, I think you're up. Dr. Byers, I should say, sorry.
Yeah, I guess next is presentations. And we have Dr. Dave Byers on standby, ready to talk about that.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Just fine.
I've got some handouts too.
So you can hear me? I think
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, awesome. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Dave Byers with Quadrix Aviation. I'm working in conjunction and in association with ICE on developing a strategic business plan for the county to consider for how the airports could operate financially. So with the handout that you're receiving right now, there should be an outline that will illustrate some of the talking points that I'd like to discuss. And feel free to interrupt me at any time during the presentation so I can perhaps respond. With that, there's a couple other handouts that I'll speak to as part of my presentation as well. I don't know if anybody really had an opportunity to give you any background on, why I was involved in this project. I've done several business plans around the country for general aviation airports, and actually been able to develop a couple of different presentations related to airports and financial self-sustainability. It was a study I was involved with when I was teaching at Embry-Riddle. The FAA actually commissioned a study for us to look at general aviation airports and their financial performance, with the idea of identifying those that were financially self-sustaining. And there's probably a couple of definitions of what that means. But after we pretty much surveyed the whole country in terms of getting their financials, and then looked at the ones that appeared to be financially self-sustaining over a long period of time, and did a deep dive on those. And that'll essentially frame some of the discussions that I'd like to have with you as we go forward. I mean, the idea of being financially self-sustaining and sufficient is that the airports generate enough revenue to cover their expenses. And there's actually two levels that I consider, one being more of a short-term goal of being self-sufficient in terms of just covering your operating expenses. The capital expenses, the sponsor share of FAA and FDOT projects, to me, over the long term, that would be the ultimate goal, is being able to cover both the operating expenses and the capital expenses associated with operating the airport. So there's absolutely no requirement that the county get involved with having to finance components of how the airport operates. That's probably a little bit more of a stretch in some cases, but in others, it should be when I say a check that any sponsor would be happy to write, primarily because it, when you get an FAA or an FDOT project, you're getting a highly leveraged capital improvement that goes right back to the balance sheet of the airport. So essentially that benefit accrues back to the county in terms of the asset value. But in the long haul, it'd be great if the airports could support that as well. So there's really no burden on the county to support the airport financially. So that's pretty much the overriding theme behind what goes into the strategic plan. How do you get there, both short-term and long-term? Also to develop tools to help the management and administration of the airport too, just so it makes everybody's job easier down the road. Having just one airport can be complicated for any community. Having two, complicates it even that much more. That you have your attention divided between two airports. But nonetheless, the idea is to have these available so that when you do need them, they're there to help you and make your jobs easier. As Todd mentioned, we're still collecting data, and I expected it to be somewhat of a struggle, primarily because I don't think anybody's really asked, some of the questions that I've been asking in terms of, well, do you have any data on, particularly in the financial areas, on expenses? And I'll talk about that in a little more detail here in a few minutes. But first, it's really great that you have that VerTower system. I do a lot of work in the control tower business, and having that kind of data, as granular as it is an awesome tool to have in terms of understanding, how your airports are operating, from day to day and over the long haul. So. One of the first handouts that you're getting is essentially an operational analysis on those two airports based on the data that was collected by this VerTower system, which essentially just eavesdrops on ADS-B data. So it collects that data, so pretty much it's got a timestamp on it. Has the aircraft registration. They cross-reference that to the database so we know what type of aircraft it was, but also what runway are you using, what direction, whether it was a landing, a takeoff, or a touch and go. So from that standpoint, just having as much data as you do have is actually just really a good thing to have in terms of understanding how those airports operate. Just a few key points there. If you're looking at it, it's kind of like a dashboard, if you will. Which day of the week is busy, and I'll speak to Inverness first. It's pretty steady all week long. Some places may peak around the weekends as opposed to others that may have Monday, Friday type traffic. The aircraft type should not be a surprise, basically single engine aircraft. What is interesting is, jets, military, and the helicopter operations, as you see. And a lot of those are training helicopters, but there's also some medevac operations mixed in there as well. You can see your runway utilization. Looks like it's favoring runway 1 by a significant margin. The types of operators too. And here we're looking at a couple of different things. One, who's using the airport. One of the things that jumped out at me is the public service. That's the sheriff's department. It could be not just Citrus County, but I've noticed other sheriff's departments bring their helicopters in and out, maybe for training or other purposes. Then the seasonal operations. So I took just the latest 12 months just to see if there was any strong seasonality. Probably the one thing that should jump out at you is the last 3 months, which it looks like traffic has really picked up compared to the previous months by a fairly significant margin. So that's an indication that you're getting busier. It could be flight training that's generating a lot of that activity. Time of day.
Dave, excuse me, where is the data that you're getting from November 22 through March 23? The Veer Tower data starts in April. I'm sorry, April 22. Never mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've got every single operation pretty much logged, so I can do such a detailed analysis. I mean, so for instance, operators, I could tell you who is your heaviest operator, or essentially where are air taxis coming from, those types of things. Also, you can look up at the top. That was pretty much the period that you have collected for Inverness. And so the total operations for that whole period, your average day, your max day, which is that could be, that's a pretty exciting day when you take a look at 260 plus operations in one day. And then how many days were you over 200 versus over 100? So that gives you kind of a sense of just how busy you are. And then just taking a look at night operations, so about 4%, a little bit more, are what, the classic definition of FAA nighttime, which is from 10 o'clock at night till 7 in the morning. So that pretty much represents Inverness. Crystal River, different story in a lot of respects, which kind of surprised me. I shouldn't be, but maybe I was expecting something different. But same basic layout, but you do have a longer period that you've had the Veer Tower operating, and you've had essentially just about the same number of operations during that period. Average day, little just shy of 70. Max day, just a little bit under 200. But generally speaking, it's probably a little bit calmer there. Just going down the column again, pretty even distribution, day of the week. Again, single engine aircraft essentially dominate the airport. The runway use, that one's a little closer to being evenly split between runway 9 and 27. And again, you can see here just the distribution in terms of flight training, public service, which is not near as significant as it was at Inverness, and then everything else, essentially the general aviation. Not as much of an increase, like in the later months, like it was at Inverness. So it's pretty much sticking around that 2,500 operations in a monthly period. And then again, time of day, very marginal nighttime operations, and you can see from the chart good days and bad days. There may be a couple of days missing where Veer Tower was not operating. That would maybe account, but you can see definitely the peaks. And then it'd be interesting to go back and see what happened during those days. It might have been a Young Eagles event or something else that maybe spiked the traffic after that. But overall, just having this data really helps. I think you understand just a little bit more about the character of each airport. They're similar but not the same, and obviously, that's going to factor into the plans for each airport financially as well. Any questions so far?
No.
Okay.
Not so far.
I'm sorry.
Not so far.
Okay. Next is from the data that I had, from the county, looking at your historical revenues and expenses. And here, just trying to discern between what data that you do have available and what's missing is one of those areas that, like I said, we're going to be creating some new information for you. So that second handout with the spreadsheet essentially shows a compilation of the data that I did receive. And this is not by any means complete yet, but it does give you a little bit of a picture on how a profit loss statement would work for the system itself. And I've got each airport separately in terms of revenues. The expenses is going to be the hard nut to crack, is being able to differentiate between what expenses were associated with Crystal River, which ones were Inverness, so that ultimately you'll have a picture of how each airport performs financially when I'm done. So, but obviously the revenues, you pretty much know down to the penny how much you do make. What is interesting though is that third line where it says airport royalty commission. It's my understanding that that's fuel flowage, and if that is correct, then you have some months that are missing, and so we may have to go back and find out how those were accounted for. But that was the only major area that I saw was inconsistent. You can see I only have 2 years worth of data, and they don't seem to align very well. Like I said, operating expenses, that's really the crux of the issue. If again, going back to this theme of financial self-sufficiency, you got to know how much it costs you to operate, what the true costs are. You do a pretty good job with from contracted services, supplies, utilities, maintenance, and administrative charges. But what the heavy lifting is going to be in identifying just the personnel costs that go into how each airport is being treated in terms of who actually works on the airport business. So breaking that down in direct and indirect. Direct would be, essentially task people that are working specifically for the airport, for airport business. So obviously Todd's time, and that may be split between each airport. And like I said, you're not going to get this down to the penny, but if you can get rough approximations of how much time people spend on each airport, you can do a much better job of figuring out how much each airport really costs the county in terms of operation. Things like legal expenses. So, if you have the county's legal department reviewing leases, for instance, or there's some, legal issue, lawsuits, or, whatever the legal department would be associated with, can they trace back how much time they spent working on airport business? And again, it may be, evenly split between both airports, or one airport had more attention than the others. Same with accounting. It could be, the county's maintenance department. Anything and everything that the county has in terms of how much time do they spend on the airport goes into this equation. And like I said, I don't believe anybody's really looked at it that way before. I do know it became an issue with another airport where they had a revenue diversion complaint where somebody accused the county, I believe it was a city, who was allegedly diverting airport revenues that goes into the city's general fund, and the airport had nothing to show for it. So the FAA came down on them with a compliance issue. Revenue diversion is something they treat very seriously. And so the task was to identify what these costs were that the county or the city was actually incurring on airport business. Turns out, no, the airport was getting a deal when you actually started allocating how much time people had spent on airport business. But it was a question that they hadn't been confronted with before. And now they're in a much better position of making those types of decisions in terms of, how do you allocate your time and what compensation, should the county get back from the airport revenues, that are, legitimate expenses. So again, it's not something that a lot of airports have that are municipally owned, whether it's a city or county, really have an easy finger on. But in the final analysis, I think it's going to help everybody understand, how much time is spent on the airport and how is that accounted for in terms of the financial relationship.
I've got a question for you, Dave.
Sure.
You mentioned about how much time spending on the airport. I'm specifically curious about that. Do you mean like physically, or like what measurement are you using, or does this also include clerically? Just want to be clear on that.
Well, you're a labor force of one, Todd, but you have a lot of support from county personnel.
Yeah.
So how do they account for their time? Now, they may not have timesheets, something that would be, tremendously easy to take a look at. But, if there's an approximation, say legal spends 7% of their time on airport issues. Okay, that's a start. If accounting, they may spend 10% handling the financial affairs. So it's really doing that deep dive. And, again, once you've established this framework, it becomes a lot easier moving forward, because now people are a little more sensitive to, okay, how much time do I really spend on the airport? So it may be, a rough estimate in the beginning, but it'll start becoming refined as you go forward.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Did I answer your question?
Absolutely.
Like I said, unless they're doing timesheets, and I doubt if it's that that refined yet, but if I can get that sense of just number one, how much is allocated in the department's budget. So that could be everything. It could be from the department head down to the admin, or even their expenses. And say they estimate they made the 7%. So 7% of the department's expenses would be allocated to the airport as an expense. Then we can start looking at, okay, that is part of the true cost of operating the airport.
Okay. Understood.
And then the other one is the depreciation expense. It's just my personal opinion, but a lot of, and I think the general accounting principles, put depreciation in with operating expenses. And since it's not really a cash outlay, I like to break it out just so you can compare apples with apples. in a lot of cases, the airport's doing well if depreciation is not accounted for. But then when you add depreciation, it looks like the airport's operating a loss. And in a lot of cases, and if you're depreciating out, say, a taxiway, the taxiway is not going to last forever. You might get 10 years out of the pavement, 15 if you're lucky. But ultimately, that's going to have to be rehabilitated. So that's why I have it divided into aviation, aeronautical, and non-aeronautical facilities. And where that's going to be helpful is when you start establishing rates and charges, that how much of an expense you have to recover, that will help establish what that rate should be for, like, say, rental space or anything else that you might want to collect. And again, I imagine there's somebody's got a ledger somewhere that has this information. If not, we will. One of my recommendations would be to create ledger accounting for those types of facilities. We may have to do some research and go back to see just exactly how much is being allocated, for the life of the facility. And same with equipment. If you have dedicated airport equipment, that should be in there as well. But once this is complete, and I think it would maybe create a much more realistic picture of how both airports operate financially. That makes everything else a lot easier down the road. Primarily when you start looking at, okay, if we're operating at a loss, a true loss, what is it going to take for us to climb out of that hole and help us get to that point where we can truly say that the airports are financially self-sufficient? Does that make sense? I mean,
Does to me.
Anybody else have any questions? Like I said, it's this is the heavy lifting in these types of studies. If you're not really prepared for this.
Yeah, Dr. Byers, would you mind going through the definitions of airport rental versus airport rental exempt and airport royalty commission?
And that's a good question. I think I asked that. I think the rentals are pretty much the out and out, T-hanger rents, hangar rents, those types of things that are easily accounted for. The rental exempts, that one's still a little fuzzy for me. It's a line item in your budget, and I have to go back and take a look. Actually, if you can bear with me for a second, I think I had the spreadsheet up and operating here. Let me just check real quick. See if I can give you an answer on that. No, it's not on the spreadsheet that I have open. Let me, I will make sure that I have a definition for those going forward so that you know exactly what those items are.
By
I
any
apologize.
chance-
I
By any
should.
chance, would those be things like facilities operated by the county themselves, like the sheriff's department or that sort of thing?
Actually, that could be more accurate. In essence, they aren't subject to the same conditions as a commercial lease or, like, say, a T-hanger rental, where you have regular increases. I think the sheriff's department does have a rental increase, but I think they just accounted for it separately.
Dr. Byers.
But I'll go back and check to make sure that that's
Sales tax that some folks
that's
are
the
exempt
case.
from.
Dr. Byers, question for you regarding the data that is missing. Would that be a concern?
Not necessarily, unless you were faced with a Part 16 complaint where the FAA said, it appears that, the county's taking too much of airport revenue to compensate itself for the work, in-kind services, those types of things. In this case, even without it, you're operating at a loss. So if you look at that bottom line of operating surplus and deficit, you are making a little bit in the last 3-4 years, but that is the missing piece right there, because I think you can agree that the county has some considerable effort that maybe isn't being compensated for. Once we've identified what those numbers are, like right now, I don't think anybody's questioned it, because it hasn't, number one, it hasn't become an issue. But then again, it's not until maybe you are confronted with having to answer that question that you have to go back, which is what I had to do with the city. To go back and take a hard look at. I mean, we were counting police calls to the airport or emergency services, and trying to figure out per call, what was the airport's county's, the city's contribution towards that.
Thank you very much.
All right. But like I said, I think once we have at least a better picture, and it may not, being able to go back, 5 or 6 years, but going forward, if we can figure out maybe what the last 2 years were and use that as the template for how to estimate and do a better job of estimating what those costs are, that the county's incurring on airport business.
And these are actual dollars? These are not in thousands of dollars, anything like that?
Now, this is actual, this is just straight up dollar amounts.
Thank you.
Fantastic question.
Yeah. It'd be nice if it were millions, but, or thousands. So the idea is, once we have this established and we feel pretty comfortable, at least, like the last 2 years as a springboard, you're going to see another table, which would be the pro forma profit loss. And what you'll see here in this line, where it says potential new income, again, that will come from 2 areas, one being aeronautical, which could be additional hangars or ground leases that are aeronautically oriented hangars, and then non-aeronautical. So going back to that study that we did way back when I was at Riddle, the big reveal was non-aeronautical revenues, that these airports were doing a fantastic job of converting space that they didn't need for hangars, ramps, or anything else, and leasing that property out to essentially entities that had really no association with aviation whatsoever. It could be, some widget plant or warehouse. And the beauty of that, one, is that they aren't tied to the aviation industry, which is notorious for how dynamic it could be, feast, famine, and just having to endure those peaks and valleys. The other is the business proposition that you offer to somebody who is interested in the property. So the basic premise is that you get a guy who wants to put up a widget warehouse, and he needs 10 acres. You're going to experience this with your the business park at Inverness. Is that I need 10 acres, but I can't afford 10 acres, or that's a big chunk of money. Say that's, $3 million, where I could lease the property for 10% of its value and have that run out 30 years at 10%. So I could take that 90% I would have invested in the land and build the actual warehouse. And with a 30-year lease, I can amortize that out easily. And he comes out ahead, and you get the revenue, from that development. So in some cases, you're not really competing with private sector. You just have a different business proposition for those people that might be interested in leasing the property as opposed to having to go out and buy it and just incur all the other costs, infrastructure, taxes, and everything else that kind of goes with building a standalone facility. So that's what's going to go into that potential new income. And there I rely on a couple of different factors, just how the community is growing. And my sense is both communities seem like, as people are trying to leave some of the busier metropolitan areas. So Tampa, for instance, Brooksville went through this. Where they actually had a growth management problem that people were just once the toll road was completed that far, it just seemed like the demand for property just exploded. And I suspect the same will hold true. I believe you're due for an extension, and I think right now you're only 45 minutes away from Tampa. So people who are relocating aren't really being displaced remotely, but you still have access to what Tampa has to offer, that whole area. But in some cases, the business, there's a quality of life that things are a lot less stressful and laid back, up in Citrus County as opposed to that Tampa St. Pete area. So that will blend in with your existing operating revenues. Obviously, there'll be general increases. Use the CPI. We'll build those in. Same with the expenses too. And usually there I'll have some kind of a escalator built into those. Sometimes I can take a look at the history and develop that number. In other cases, you just take a stab at it and track it for a couple of years. But if we can, look at a 5-year window for achieving at least that short-term financial self-sufficiency, that you can cover your operating revenues or expenses with the revenues that you're going to generate. That gives you the basis for what that strategic plan is. That, okay, so in order for us to do this, here's the goal, and then you have objectives and tasks along the way. So in some cases, your economic development people might get involved in marketing the airport properties, along with the rest of the just bringing businesses into the community. But here now you have a motive to want to do that because you have a goal of being financially self-sufficient. You want those airports to pay for themselves. So, and again, I'd be interested to see how the business park's going to, play out. I've seen some sketches on, at least some of the, basic layouts. But, in some cases, I look at, you get a prospect that comes in and you can offer them like, what do you need? 1 acre, 10 acres, 100 acres. You tell us what you need, and I think we have a lot for you. Generally speaking, it takes about 2 years to complete a deal from the first contact to closing takes about 2 years. So it's not just a short strike. And some of it you're competing with other locations. So if there are other incentives that you can offer, or maybe the state offers. One of the things I like to leave is just making it easy for you to sell the deal, and just have all the tools in place to make it easy for somebody to make that decision. And, just, make it easy for them. It's not quite shovel ready type things, but at least you're giving them a lot of information to help them make that decision. And if you come across as being businesslike, and people walk away, man, these people know what they're talking about. It just makes it a lot easier, again, to sell the area. Any more questions on the financials? I'm sorry it's not complete like I would hope it would be, but like I said, there's some some fairly intense research that still needs to be done.
No, I don't think we have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, so some of the areas I wanted to talk about, and some of it I already mentioned, the existing leases, the tenants, I think there the idea is keep them happy. And, I wouldn't say business as usual, but, just making it hard for them to want to leave. Then looking at what developable property you still have left, both aeronautical and non-aeronautical. I spoke to the financial alignments, the idea of profit centers. So you already have those established. They just haven't been identified like that. So again, that may have the same breakdown of what's aeronautical, non-aeronautical. Cost centers, that's the heavy lift. Then what I call policy guiding documents. So right now, rules and regulations for, how each airport should operate. What do you tell people? Here's what, here's what to do, here's what not to do. We got a rule or regulation for that. And that's a defensive measure for you. If somebody did something really stupid and got hurt, being the litigious society that we are, you guys have the deep pockets. So was there a rule or regulation? You don't fuel aircraft in a hangar. Some of it's just the obvious. And you don't want to over legislate or regulate any airport, but just putting together some reasonable guidelines for people to follow. And it affects not just your tenants, but anybody who operates at the airport or is even on airport property. The minimum standards, you have those already. They probably just need to be refreshed. That's also not only to protect you, but you have a responsibility to the general public for the people that you allow to operate commercial aeronautical services. It's the case of somebody operates a skydiving outfit or something, and I hope you don't get involved with skydivers because they just will drive you nuts. But are they safe? So somebody comes up, they want to do a tandem jump, and you don't know who these people are. You just, do they have the right aircraft? Are the skydivers certified? There's all kinds of examples, and usually there's some horror stories, as a part of that, and that's what I think you have an eye on, making sure that you have these standards in place. So anybody who comes in wanting to do business, and minimum standards only apply to commercial aeronautical services. Other tenants, they don't apply. But this is just aeronautical uses. You may have some other policies and practices in place, or for instance, how do you handle somebody who wants to operate or work on aircraft, but he's not an FBO in the classic sense? Do you let him operate? In some cases, and there's airports that do that, where the maintenance on the airport, it's just like the gentleman from Wright Rudder, getting mechanics, and you got to pay them to stick around, as opposed to somebody who has the proper certifications, but he doesn't do enough business at your airport to support what would be a classic FBO or a specialized operator. So you allow him to operate, but you have a permit that he pays for, he's insured, and he's allowed to operate. So that may be something, for consideration. But we'll take a look at that. As far as governance and management, if just trying to identify what are the roles and responsibilities, what are they now, what they made, what changes may be made, and at some point, do you have more than just one person assigned to the airport? So you have Todd as management, but does he have any staff to take care of business? And so eventually I can see a shift from the county, say, handling, managing T hangars, for instance. That's like running an apartment building. You got people that don't pay on time. You have people that, how do you keep the T hangars full? Right now, you're in the enviable position of not having vacancies, but that'll roll back into you have the waiting list is growing, but if you priced what it costs to build a T hanger these days, you'll be horrified. If you even looked at it, because as a standalone project, you can't afford it. You can't charge enough rent to cover what it costs you to build them. Thankfully, the state contributes pretty significantly, and that's been great for economic development to keep supplying that demand. But eventually, it may be somebody on airport staff that takes care of that. And then this SWOT analysis. If you're familiar with that concept, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, I generally compress that into assets and opportunities. So the assets are the things that you have, or the things that you want to have. And then the opportunities are, what are you going after? Do you need a longer runway to support larger aircraft, or do you need to concentrate on developing your non-aeronautical property to help develop revenue? So what I intend to do is in the next week or so is send you a survey, and it'll be pretty self-explanatory. I'd like for you to list what your perspective is on both airports, from this framework of what strengths do you think each airport has, what weaknesses do you think they have, what are the opportunities that you see for each airport, and what do you see getting in the way? So if it's competition with other airports, or just the idea of how much it's going to cost to deliver, but what happens from that that exercise is I think it'll give everybody a better picture of just how the airport's perceived internally, amongst you, as helping the county guide, the future of the airport. And I think some of that will convey back to the public. And, some cases the airports are looked at as like a yacht club for airplanes. What a lot of folks don't understand, in many cases, is not about the people who are based at the airport. It's about the people who fly in to do business in the community. And so from that point of view, it's more catering to the visitor, the transient operator who's coming in. He brought, some executives in to do business with some company that's locally, and they're flying to this airport, either Crystal River or Inverness, because they want to, they're doing business with somebody right there in town. So that'll be interesting, and I'll probably have some other questions that I'll ask you to provide, and then we can do that. You don't have to even have to sign it. Just give me your candid opinions on how each what do you see for each airport. And then finally, these are deliverables. So mission and vision statements. What's important there is just, can you in one sentence discuss what you see for each airport? What is it? What are they doing now? And what do you see them doing, say, 20 years in the future? What might that look like, or maybe even less of a period? And that'll be a collaborative effort. And a lot of that comes out of that SWOT analysis. As I get a better picture, and we all get a better picture of what people see from a consensus type perspective of, what should be the mission of each airport and where do you think it's going? Obviously, the goals and objectives is everything we've talked about before. The planning, the policy guiding documents, a marketing plan. So, there may be different aspects of how would you market Crystal River, for instance, or do you want to focus on Inverness and the business part? Who might be target prospects for that, and how do you reach them? And then finally, the financial plan. So a set of rates and charges. Here's what you're charging now. Here's what you may want to do to change those. Putting together that pro forma of operational revenues and expenses, looking 5 years out. And then if any, the capital improvements, taking a look at your JSIP, which is your list of capital projects that you'd like the FAA to pay for, or FDOT, and see what adjustments need to be made there, and how does those costs factor into that financial plan as well. And there may be some projects that are revenue generating, and what would be the impact of, say, another 10-unit T hangar, what would be the impact on revenues, from that perspective. So that's pretty much all of the elements of the strategic plan that I see. There may be some other things that I missed, but and if there are, just let me know. But at this point, I'm going to shut up and hear what you have to say about this.
Okay, just a couple of general remarks. But first, I appreciate the approach you're taking. It's very structured, it's an engineering approach. And it's very organized, and appreciate how you're going about it. I think it'll give us some excellent data. Something you should be aware of, but I don't know if it's been passed on to you, but our board several months back did develop a vision statement for the airports. And I don't know if that's been forwarded to you, but I think you should have that, because it does talk about what we'd like to see the airports be. When you get to the part of your project where you're developing the financial plans, rates and charges, I'm wondering if we could have a session about that as an opportunity, see it as a draft and some opportunity for some discussion there. And then the last, just a general question, by any remote chance, are you a pilot yourself?
Yes, I've been flying since '73, which,
Cool.
Good grief, that's what, 50 years ago. Good grief. Ooh,
right.
Scary. That's pretty much how I got started in the business. I thought I'd be an airline pilot like a lot of my colleagues, but realized pretty quick that I wasn't going to, enjoy that as a career. I was already married, 2 kids when I went to school. And something about airports I really could get excited about. I think it was the pretty blue taxiway lights or something. So I sort of followed that path instead of the flying. But I flew, for a while with other companies. We'd fly to job sites, and either I'd fly the engineers. I'm a planner by trade, but I'd fly the engineers, or maybe we both had projects at particular client airports. I did a lot of that around Florida, around the country. Also, A&P mechanic, sort of fell into that. Sort of a kind of a geek when it comes to working on them, and did a little time as a flight instructor, trying to keep students from killing you. Really, it's fascinating, really, just how people learn how to fly. You're teaching them. But so I have all that as background, so I can understand it from that perspective, but also, the community, in terms of, how do airports fit into the bigger picture?
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? One question, Dr. Byers. To what extent will your strategic analysis of the value of the airports consider what economic impact the folks that fly into the airports have on the community, both in terms of people moving here, as you were talking about earlier, and just folks that come in for recreation or whatever, to the extent that the airports encourage that and increase that? How do we, is there a way to quantify or at least consider that impact when we're looking at the profit loss statement?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I think the state has been doing an update of their economic benefit analyses for each airport.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what iteration this is, but they seem to be getting better and better at it in terms of estimating just what is the value of a visitor in terms of what do they spend in the community. So obviously they might buy fuel, and that is a direct impact on the FBO, and that filters through. That could be the basis for, say, a longer term survey, just finding a way to get people to share that information. That seems to be the hardest part. In a lot of cases you're guessing, but if it's more of a business visit, I think there, number one, with the Ver Tower, we know exactly who's coming and going. I don't know, it's been kind of a controversy where somebody had a website that tracked Elon Musk and his airplane. And so, if he flies into a community, he doesn't do that by accident. So then the question goes, well, what's going on? We can do a little bit of that. It's not quite corporate espionage, but, if you know that a particular company is spending a lot more time here getting ready to do some kind of a development, I think there you can probably match that up with what was the airport's impact on that decision.
And of course, the same then revolves around something like deciding to invest in a business park, deciding to support that concept and all the tax revenue that will bring, that decision in and of itself will bring to the community with respect to the various corporations that come in. Anyway, just something to think about as we move forward with an overall recommendation as to the viability and the economic benefit or lack thereof of these airports.
Well, that'll be a good question too for your economic development people. That if there's a way to for them to ask the question, well, how important was the having the airport close by, with decent facilities to you or people who did business with you.
Mhm.
And that was the one big shift, I think, particularly during COVID, that the businesses didn't stop flying. If anything, it started picking up. You'll see that a lot in the fractional charters, the net jets, and you've got them there. NextJets, FlexJets, they show up on the data.
Mhm.
So, those aren't just the 1%ers. Those are people who use, NetJets as if it was their own corporate flight department.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry to take up so much of your time, but
No, it's very good.
I think I originally wanted a 2-hour session with you guys, and that might have been a little bit of an overload. But I think being able to just give you guys the big picture in terms of how we're structuring the study, I think it's going to help you, down the road when you see what the proposals are in terms of here's what I would recommend, and it's not just me, it's a collaborative effort, to be sure.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions I can answer for you?
No, I think we're good. I think we're ready for Daniel coming to the Lions Den.
Okay, Mike, I'll just summarize, and I hope to be at the next meeting physically. I just had a conflict, I had to be in 2 places at one time. And
I
I
understand.
think we'll be, and we'll have a lot more information for you, and pretty much, starting to see daylight at the end of the tunnel. So my hope is to be there physically at your next meeting.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So the extent to which Daniel is going to now survey us, should we conclude our regular meeting and then go into that essentially a survey workshop?
Well, I think what Dave wants to do is he briefed you guys, right? You have a context of what's going to happen with the study. I think what he wants to do is provide the SWOT analysis to you. I think via email, we talked yesterday, Dave and I, and it's either he's going to call each one of you individually or send you a written survey. And that's what he was saying.
Okay.
Don't even put your name on it. Somehow get it back, and that way he could pour through the information. And then I think from that, because we kind of went back and forth whether or not he comes up here first and tells the information and doesn't give you any time to kind of digest, okay, what precisely are we going through in this study? But I could ask you tough questions. I kind of, if I need to.
No, I mean, if you, it sounds as though you folks have a plan, so,
Yeah.
I think, I won't speak for the group, but I think I'm happy with letting you go down the plan that you think will get you the best information.
Now, if you have information right now that you want to share, I'll just make notes. I can pass along to Dave, and it's up to you guys how you want to do it.
Anybody have anything that they want to pass on at this point?
Well, I'm not sure if there's a way to track it or not, but the loss of business that we've had in both airports because of the length of the runway, that I'm familiar with, a number of aircraft had to fly into Brooksville, say, for example, simply because we did not have that. So there's that lost economic opportunity that should be looked at. And I'm not sure how we would be able to track anything of that nature, because it's, I mean, as he shared, the vert tells who's coming in. Mm-hmm. But if they're going into Brooksville and they're having to rent a vehicle to come up, it kind of bypasses. So that's something I think is the gray area that you're going to miss, but yet is critically important, simply because You know, and I don't know if there's a way that they track them at the airport that that they're having to divert to Brooksville instead of landing at Crystal River. You know, I don't know, but I know of a number of aircraft that had to divert that. You know, otherwise Crystal River would have been a beneficiary of those flights coming in.
Yeah, I think that's a function of a master plan typically. I think
Okay.
with the VERTOWER information, doing a snapshot in time of what's transpired over the last few years, you could see trend data moving up, size of aircraft coming up, frequency, they're coming. You start looking at your critical aircraft, and so at least for Inverness, that's a Dassault Falcon 900. It's a pretty large aircraft in of itself, but larger than that, when you get above 5,000 feet, you get into 6,000 up to 8,000 feet. Obviously, you start accommodating a lot more, but looking at, I think the master plan for Inverness was done in 2015. The critical aircraft didn't change; it stayed the same. But now that you guys are looking at doing another master plan coming up, start looking into whether that aircraft category needs to change, and then justify some type of runway extension. I was talking to our planner the other day, and at least right now with 5,000 feet, there's probably not much discussion or justification for a runway extension. However, you look at Crystal River, and some may say from the FAA side, a runway extension may not be needed. Well, we build it, that's not we will build it and they will come, but there is justification for it. Just in a little different methodology than what the FAA, when they ascribe, terminal area forecast and what your critical aircraft should be, sometimes markets change.
Right. And I know in particular with Inverness, with the fact that they've got those leases, from Fish and Wildlife or from the FHP or the Coast Guard that are coming in now that they hadn't been in the past. Is the potential of that to increase here over the next, say, 3 to 5 years? Again, those are some of the questions that, I don't know if it's trackable or if it's obtainable, but to be just kept in mind for the future. And again, those are the opportunities whenever you're going to build the SWAT out.
Yep. Okay.
Just a kind of some remarks that he made very early on. He was talking about how Citrus County is a bit unusual in that we have 2 airports. And there's a lot of history as to how those 2 airports came into the county. They came in for different reasons, one way back and one pretty far back, but not as far back. But at one time, but periodically from time to time, the question does come out, why does Citrus County need 2 airports? All right. At one time from my own reading of the history, in the late 1970s, there was a concerted effort to look at that issue and possibly do away with both airports and have a central location. And that whole idea became very controversial, went down in flames. And ever since then, Citrus County has been committed to having 2 airports. And, as we say, the 2 airports serve different functions. They're also evolving new functions, right? So I guess just a general remark to you is that, we're looking that your strategic business plan that's being drafted maintain the idea that we have 2 strong airports, that Citrus County needs 2 strong airports, that it's our vision for the county, and it's based on longstanding history.
Well, and I think through many different initiatives that the county's doing, you see it, I think, in the landscaping project we talk about, in signage. This airport has one theme, this airport has another theme, so they both have their own identities. And with 35,000 operations at one, 28,000 and change operations at another, you look at, not to call anybody out, but like Levy County, there's 2 small airports. One has the smallest runway in the state. Just interesting little tidbits, and it's like it has 2 based aircraft, and it's still up.
Levy County
Levy.
only has the one at Cedar Keys. They have another one?
Well, they don't operate both. They're
That's
both
right,
yeah.
in the county. One is, the Cedar Key one,
Yeah.
and then the larger one with the 3 runways, concrete runway, George T. Williston, yeah.
Oh, Williston. Oh, that's
Yep.
okay.
Yeah. But nonetheless, they both serve, Inverness serves its purpose. Crystal River has its purpose.
Yep.
And I don't think there's any discussion at all, unless something drastic happens. There's enough traffic to sustain both. And a terminal area forecast, at least in the master plan and the system plan that the state FDOT puts together, there's no indication that there'd be any reversal of that.
Okay.
So.
Very good.
All right. And just as a tidbit, you guys were talking about economic development. Frank's here, but I was looking at the FDOT just released their 2022 economic impact statement. They do it statewide, district-wide, and airport. And Inverness was 68.8 million. I think they changed their methodology though, because everybody made a big jump. Because previously in 2019 it was 9.6 million, so it went from 9 to 68 million.
It's all because of Andy.
And then Crystal River is a little lower, but at 54.7 million. So combined, about 112 million of total economic, direct, indirect, and induced impacts to the county. It's a lot of money.
Okay.
So from
Oh.
just comparing other airports, that's a good marker.
Okay.
I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Frank, did you have anything for us?
Not yet. I like how it's gone now.
Okay.
It's a good update for us.
All right. So that being the case, we have anything we need to communicate to the board?
I'd say not at present, other than the fact that a bunch of us need to reapply.
Indeed, indeed. Don't forget to do that. The deadline is the deadline, What is the deadline?
That's a fantastic question.
It's going to be announced on the November 28th BOCC meeting. After that, a public notice will go out. We will take applications until December 28th or 29th.
Okay.
So
All right.
it'll be 1 month after it's announced and the release
So there'll be
goes
one
out.
more reminder next meeting.
Absolutely.
Don't forget, don't.
So will that be in time for the BOCC to do their approval before we meet again?
They will review in January and nominate.
I think the February meeting is the start of the new term for us.
Yes, because after they review the applications and nominate in January, then February, we have to swear you in.
Okay, all right.
You'll have to bring pizza, not donuts to that, because there'll be a bunch of us.
Pizza, not donuts, all right.
Well, you could bring pizza and donuts.
That being said, I'd like to throw the meeting open to the public. If anybody has anything they'd like to say in response to what's gone on so far today.
Hello again, Andy Chan. First off, I am glad you added the open to the public at the end. Try not to take too much advantage of that. One thing I forgot to mention is that thanks to Todd, the Metroliner that has been on our ramp for years is now finally gone.
Oh, yeah.
And our team cleaned up the remaining bits and little scraps and things earlier today, so that's finally gone. There are still two disabled aircraft on the field that are not ours. They don't belong to Wright Rudder. One just recently had a nose gear collapse about 2 weeks ago, and another one's been there about 2 years. So we would like to get rid of those as well, but we don't own either of those aircraft. But thanks, Todd, for helping make that Metro go away. There was a question about the sheriff. I did bring up that there was an incident at Citrus County Blessings. Just to provide a little bit more color on that, Blessings did hire 3 sheriff's deputies for the event to make sure that no one drank and drove home and no one drove on the runway. That did not occur, even though there were 3 deputies present. And in the report, it did not mention that 3 deputies were there and failed to prevent the incident from occurring. So I am somewhat disappointed in that lack of service there. They also, as you probably are aware, I have brought it to the board several times, they do pay a portion of their rent in-kind services, which does require surveys of the airport and security services at both airports, which the sheriff has not done for more than 3 years now going on. And so that may be a portion of that that was in the financial report is $20,000 a year in so-called services that are not rendered. Didn't hear an update on the Crystal River Ball. I forget the name of the street, but hopefully that's still moving forward. I know you guys needed to buy it and things like that last time.
Yeah, I've talked with a representative from Duke, and it's just trying to schedule to do the maintenance.
Okay, glad to hear that. We used to get tower updates. Is that now gone? We don't get tower updates anymore?
We've not gotten them in a while.
Is there a reason for that?
I don't know anything about. All right.
Okay. I bring that up because I was reminded that a tower south of the Inverness Airport within Citrus County confines is now not lighting up at night the way it's required to do so. And I forgot about that. I should put that in an email to you, but we would have bring it up to the gentleman that used to sit over there with the beard. I forget his name. But that tower is now a hazard to aircraft, and it is directly, if you're shooting the runway 1 approach or nav approach, it is slightly off to your left. It's much lower than you would be if you were on glide slope, but it should still be lit. I'm curious if Vert Tower, I look at our Vert Tower all the time, but I don't look at Crystal Rivers because I don't have a login. But does anyone know if Vert Tower for Crystal River logs runway 18 and 36? Because on the
I
data,
noticed it wasn't on the report.
it's not on the report. Yeah, just a question for Vert Tower / someone there. Or, I don't know. Because I'm curious what those numbers would be.
I guess the question would be: has anyone used it? Does it get used?
I have seen aircraft land. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, 1836 is used regularly,
Okay.
both for training and just people, especially tail draggers, things like that.
Sure. I guess the time that I come by, I never see it get used, but that doesn't mean it doesn't get used.
It's the exception rather than the rule, for sure.
Yes, and but I can definitely ask or look in my data Vert Tower as well and see. I don't know. Look into that for sure.
I use it quite a bit personally.
Okay.
It's my favorite runway over there. There is a fuel flow error on this report. At least Wright Rudder has been paying fuel flow fees for the last 6 years, so I don't know how the data shows some years and not others. But I just want to clarify that Wright Rudder has been.
It's not complete. This is an incomplete draft.
He mentioned that they were missing months, so he excluded the whole year.
Yep, just wanted to point that out that we have been paying. I did like that he said that, if you were going to build a building, a 30-year lease might be kind of a standard. It's good to hear that. Let's see. I don't know what I meant by that. Biggest thing that I wanted to bring to the attention of this board and to you, Todd, that I haven't just crossed my mind while we were sitting here. Just last week or 2 weeks ago, the EPA came out with their finding that 100 low-leaded is now endangered. And this is part of the EAGLE initiative, which stands for Eliminate Aviation Gasoline Leaded Emissions. So by 2030, according to the EPA, there will be no more 100 low-leaded. I don't necessarily believe that to be true, but I'd like to bring it to the attention of this board because right now there are about 4 different fuel alternatives. Some of them will require different equipment than is currently utilized for 100 loaded. Some will not, especially since you guys are doing the new fuel farm at Crystal River. It would be wise to think about those potential fuels in the future and then think about what the approach is, because it's likely that prior to 2030, there will be a period of time in which 100 low-leaded exists and the alternative fuel will be ready, meaning rather than 2 tanks, each airport may need 3 tanks or a temporary solution of some sort. Now, there are lots of grants coming out for this, so Citrus County doesn't necessarily have to fund the bulk of this. But just to point that out, that is coming up very, very, very soon. And it's a big topic both at industry and governmental levels, including the GAJSC SAT that I just mentioned, but other organizations as well. Of course, Gamma and EAA and AOP, everyone's involved.
The
in
rest of
this.
the alphabet.
All the alphabets are
Yeah,
involved in
yeah,
that. But it is happening. It is going to happen. I don't honestly believe the 2030 timeframe will occur, but the finding that 100 low leaded is endangered is significant, because prior to 2 weeks ago, they hadn't said anything along those lines. And what it comes down to is the number of refineries that are willing to do it are diminishing, because there's not enough volume and then a whole bunch of regulatory hoops they have to jump through. So it is a consideration for both airports, a significant consideration in the near future. So I don't know the answer as to the new fuel farm, but hopefully it's the designers are thinking about that, so it's forward compatible. All right, thank you guys.
I've got a quick question for Andy. The Citrus Blessing incident, was the event that happened at that airport, was that a county approved?
It's county required event. If you look at our lease and the RFQ, that's an event that took place before we became the occupants, and is in the documentation. It's required that we have fundraising events for nonprofits to include Citrus County Blessings, and also Boys and Girls Club Suitcase Party, which hasn't occurred for a number of years because of COVID, but they are trying to restart that this next calendar year if it's a possibility.
You're saying it's in the RFQ that you have to have these events in that,
Correct.
specifically those?
I'll have to look at it, but it did, at least verbally was communicated to us that we would not be approved as a leasee if we did not host those events at no cost to the nonprofits.
Okay, it was my understanding that if you're gonna have an event, it needs to be, the county needs to approve it. So I'll take a look too at the RFQ, but
Oh, that reminds me of my other point. First off, happy to do that.
Sure.
And I apologize if that is written elsewhere. I am unaware of a set of airport rules that kind of provide guidance for what is and is not allowed. That is one thing he did say, is having a set of rules. And the
Minimum
gentleman,
standards, yeah.
I'm sorry?
in minimum standards, yeah.
Well, minimum standards, but also, for example, there are several AMPs working out of the county T hangars. I have no idea if they're insured or if they have paid their county business tax. But there's no set of rules as to if that's allowable or not allowable.
I
as an
believe
example.
that's in the lease that they're not allowed to do that.
You're telling me that there's mechanics that are renting a hangar and they're performing maintenance for other aircraft?
I don't know if they are, if they're the tenants or not the tenants. I don't know.
Okay.
We don't have.
Is there any indication that's leading you towards that? You know what I mean? Like, is there any
whether
probable
they,
cause or that you would think?
Same person in the same hangar multiple times.
It is, yes,
where-
yes.
I mean,
But I don't. We don't manage the county.
Yep,
T
of course.
hangars,
Sure.
So I'm not sure.
Huh.
Yeah, I think it would be great if there was a set of standardized rules to say, okay, if you are going to perform maintenance on an aircraft, do you have to be a registered business in the county? I think the answer is yes, but whose responsibility is it to enforce that to your tenants? Would it be our responsibility or would it be your responsibility, as an example?
Yeah.
Prior to this, there were a lot of people, prior to the signs going up that said environmentally sensitive areas, people were regularly playing golf and riding dirt bikes and running their dogs in the retention ponds. And that was allowed previously by Quincy, but then you came along and put signs up. But there's no guidance besides those signs as to what is or is not allowable. So I would
Right.
definitely be in favor for a set of rules that were, maybe put together by this board or by Todd and then, codified in some way so that there is some standardization, not only among commercial tenants, but among the residential, not the residential, but
Yeah.
the private tenants as well. For example, if you look at leases, most tenants cannot put things in various places like the T hangars. However, other tenants, like the sheriff, are permitted to put things even outside of their leasehold area. So there's not a set of standard rules, being enforced. Yeah, but if there was a set of rules, I think it'd be great. So, but yeah, there are AMPs operating there, and I have no idea if they're insured or not.
Okay. Thank you.
So, thank you.
I recall that one being in the lease. That's a,
Sure. It's the first time of me hearing it, so, what probable cause, you know what I mean? Like, do I need to ask every single person and investigate every single person that is in our T hangers for this versus, is it necessary or not, or is it unnecessary? So I'll take a look at it. It's no problem.
Arguably, somebody reporting it could constitute probable cause,
Sure.
in theory.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Or,
a notice to all tenants that this is,
Yeah, I could do that.
especially if you develop that set of standardized rules and regulations, send it to all the
Along,
tenants, and anybody violating that should, if you're aware of somebody violating one of these rules, you could call in anonymously and rat them out.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else from the public? Next meeting, February 14th. It's a Thursday this time.
Did I?
Did I hear February?
December.
December.
Am I right,
What did I say?
February?
You said
February.
February.
Goodness gracious.
You're ready to get to
Are you on vacation?
I mean, if you want.
A bit of a vacation.
See?
Holy
Valentine's
smokes.
Day is that brownie batter donut.
I know, right?
Hint.
December 13th, my apologies, Thursday, 2:00, right here. Same bat time, same bat channel. Anybody else have anything? If so, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn, sir.
Carl?
Second.
Keith, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, folks.